Dear Rentals Club members, welcome. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Viktorija Molnar. She's the acting Secretary General of the European Holiday Rental Association. We're going to be talking about very important topic. So if you are an EU, European Union host, or if you have properties in the EU, that's going to be very important to you. Big things are coming your way. And for some reason, I think most of us have not even aware, we try not to pay attention. It's very, very important. And Viktorija is an expert. She's be able to take us through these big topics. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome Viktorija, and she's going to share with us why you should pay attention. Viktorija, hello, how are you?
Hi, Thibault. Thank you very much for inviting me to share the knowledge which I have on the EU legislation and beyond. So once again, thank you very much, and I'm doing very well, and I hope that you are doing it very well today.
I'm pretty good, and I say I'm psyched because I think I heard part of your speech at the Scale Rentals conference in Barcelona, right? And I've written, for example, about the topic about VAT in EU. I've written about what's going to happen for small hosts, as there's a lot of data that's going to be shared by the EU. But again, can you convey with us how important that is? Like, if I'm a property manager watching this today, or I'm a host watching this, how important is it for me?
Thank you, Thibault. Maybe before I answer to your question, I would like to say what the European Holiday Home Association is. So EHHA, as we say it, is the United Voice for Short-Term Rental Accommodation Players. And the EHHA is the association based in Brussels, the capital of European Union, as we say it, where all EU institutions are based, and all these EU institutions are making EU laws, right? So I'm also sitting in Brussels, and I'm supervising what EU institutions are making, and especially I'm looking, through the short-term rental perspective, if these draft EU laws will affect directly or indirectly short-term rental accommodation players. So EHHA members are national associations that represent property managers, property owners. We also have online short-term rental platforms, and also companies which provide ancillary services. So should you be interested in becoming the member, feel free to connect me. I'm happy to provide you further information on that. So what do we do? As I said before, I'm supervising, I'm overlooking what kind of EU legislation is being drafted, and how it is being drafted, how it will affect the short-term rental accommodation players. And I'm also looking what is happening when it comes to short-term rental rules at the EU member state level. And probably, as every host in different member states and property manager, you should know that when it comes to short-term rental rules, a lot is happening, right? So rules are constantly changing. Sometimes it is even difficult to understand what has changed. So it's really difficult, I think, when you think about if you're a simple host, a private person who is renting short-term rental on an occasional basis, right? So when it comes to the EU, it's quite a big year this year, because European Commission has proposed two EU laws. So these two EU laws will, cover all the EU member states once or if they are adopted. So one is the proposal for the EU regulation on the short-term rental data collection and sharing. And the other one is it is called VAT in a digital age proposal, or in the short term, we say it VIDA. And these are pretty much amendments to the EU VAT Directive. Now you heard two how definitions, if I could say so, the directive and the regulation. So this is the EU terms for legislation. A regulation, what does it mean, regulation? Regulation means that if regulation is adopted at EU level, it means that this legislative act will be directly applied in all member states. So member states, they do not have to make any additional laws. It is already there and they have to comply with it. When it comes to the directive, this is the VIDA proposal, VAT in the Digital Age proposal. Directive means that EU is sort of setting some sort of goal, what has to be achieved, but the form and how it has to be achieved, it is left to member states. So which means that member states, they will have additionally they will have to transpose the directive into the national law. So they will have to create national laws which would say, look, this is the directive, we need to achieve this goal, and we will achieve this goal by doing this, 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 this. So this is the difference between directive, in this case it is about the VAT, and regulation, it will be directly applied in all EU member states. So we have this year as EHHA, we have been working on both. Both of these proposals were proposed at the end of last year, and it went into the EU legislative proceedings. So as I said before, in Brussels we have three EU institutions: European Commission, European Parliament, and the Council. And all these three EU institutions work together to make the EU law, to adopt it. So Commission was proposing it, both of them, they proposed it, and in the case of regulation on the data collection and sharing, it went for further discussion to European Parliament and the Council. And in case of the VAT in the Digital Age proposal, it went only to the Council. These are two different legislative procedures. I don't want to, to bomb you with so much EU information, but it is being under the discussion, to put it shortly. And we are working on it that, that the text would look as good as it is possible when it comes to, application and to the short-term rental providers. So now, Thibault, then
if I can indeed, Viktorija, thank you so much for explaining again what the difference between a directive and regulations. I think it's really super clear now, right, for most people. And again, it's sometimes we think the EU is a black box, and actually I do not think it is, right? We're going to be talking about these texts and these procedures, these processes you've just described, and actually usually it's online. It's online in multiple languages, right? It's actually most of the time whenever there's something new, the EU, for example, ask for opinion. They say, hey, do you want if you're a person, if you or a body, an organization, you are free to give your opinion on different things. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's a big role that you are playing, right? You are, whenever there's a process like this, when the EU is gathering information to understand the situation or is making a first proposal, you are basically one of the voices for the industry that's influencing or trying to influence, at least, right, even the gathering information, the text, or even its application, right? It's a correct way to say what you do, right?
Absolutely. And so EHHA, is probably will soon be 10 years old. It's not very old organization in Brussels terms, because we have very old organizations, associations here, which represent businesses. And as long as EHHA is alive, we have been calling the EU to do something about the fragmentation of short-term rental rules happening in different member states, because we have core freedoms in European Union. The freedom of movement, right, which means that we can move freely across the borders, right? The freedom of workers, we can, workers can move again to different countries and work there. Then we have the freedom to provide services, which means that service providers again can provide the services in any EU member state they want, and they shouldn't face overburdensome administrative procedures. So we have very core EU principles, and we believe that, when it comes to the short-term rental rules, these rules are so fragmented. It's so difficult, if you think, through the EU perspective, it is so difficult for the EU cross-border short-term rental provider to provide services, because every time you will face not only the, the short-term rental rules at the national level, all the time you will face the rules at a very granular level, which means at the level of municipalities, at the level of cities. So let's say, imagine you are EU startup, let's say the website, online booking platform, right? So you want to start a business in EU, and what you will face that you as an online platform, you will have to understand all these short-term rental rules at the cities, at the municipal level, before you can actually provide, the simple service, which is pretty much booking, providing the booking engine for the guests. So it's yeah.
Indeed, and in this case, I mean, it does mean that I worked at Booking.com in the past, right? And a company like Booking.com, even for them, I can tell you it's hard to follow whatever's happening. Oh, there's okay, now in Barcelona, you have to put a license number, and that's the format you have, and it's other cities completely different. Other city has a cap and the rest. And so I agree with you. It does mean that but they're rich. Booking.com has money, Airbnb has money, so they can hire people to follow this, right, on each country. But it does mean for a startup, it's kind of hard because you cannot compete with these big platforms. In the end, all these different levels of complicated regulations only play in the hands of the big platforms who can hire people and maybe pay fines if they have to. But so this rule of simplification and also making things a bit more clear, transparent. Let's start with the question of VAT, which actually, again, it may be the one that's maybe if people hear this, they may be very worried if they don't even know what it's about. So if I summarize it, so basically starting, I think, January 2025, VAT will be applied to short-term rental bookings. And I'm reading things like, oh, suddenly it may increase by, 10% or 20% the price. That sounds very scary. So and now, thanks to you, I heard already it's a directive. So actually it may be different from one country to another. So walk us through this. So what is this about? Why is it happening? Is it going to like really increase from one day to another, the prices of this? Are we going to be not competitive anymore? What's happening?
Yeah, so I hope, Thibaut, that it will not be applied. That's my hope, and this is what we are working on, because at this stage, every member state have actually quite different regimes when it comes to the short-term rentals and VAT. So, for example, countries as France, they actually exempt short-term rentals from paying VAT if they don't provide, I think, 4 additional services, regardless of provision of overnight stay. We have also a few other member states who also exempt short-term rentals from VAT. So every member state at this stage have different regime how they exempt or they don't exempt short-term rentals from VAT. So this Commission proposal, again, is not yet adopted. It is being discussed by all 27 EU member states. And the discussions are ongoing, and we don't know how the final text will look like. But what I can tell you is what the Commission proposed, and which is very, very concerning for us. So probably the main and the biggest concern is that Commission is proposing that all short-term rentals should pay VAT. And by saying all, I'm saying that, for example, private people and exempt from VAT SMEs will also be pulled into the VAT net. So, for example, if you are a private person who advertises the short-term rental on online short-term rental platform, according to the Commission's original text on this VAT in the digital age proposal, will have to charge on the top of the price the VAT of the member state where the short-term rental accommodation is established. So, for example, if the short-term rental is in Denmark, right, and the host is putting the short-term rental on one of the online platform will have to charge 25% of VAT on the top of the price. So if the price was 100 euros for the guest, online short-term rental platform will have to charge on the top 25 euros. So at the end, the price for the consumer will increase by 25 euros. So it will be 125 euros instead of 100. And here we're talking about the offer made, well, the advertisement made by the private person. The same applies for exempt from VAT SMEs, micro enterprises, because usually member states, countries, they have thresholds, right? Like thresholds of turnover. And if you don't go through this threshold, you as an SME, as a micro enterprise, are able to benefit from simplified administrative procedure. You don't need to, to register for VAT, etc. This Commission's original proposal says that even the short-term rental advertisements, which are being put by these SMEs, exempt from VAT, will also, online platforms will also have to charge the VAT on their proposal. So they're pulling private people and exempt from VAT SMEs into the VAT net. So they're making these two providers of short-term rental services pretty much professional providers. So, which was not the case before, right? Because if you're a private person, it's obvious you're a private person. You don't need to comply with the, professional laws, such as, for example, compliance to the VAT, etc. So they are pushing them into the professional world, and at the same time, they are disadvantaging them. How? Because in the normal world, if you are registered for the VAT, you charge the VAT, but at the same time, you are able to deduct the input VAT. What does it mean? If I compare it with hotels, they charge the overnight stay with VAT, right? At the same time, they can deduct the VAT because they buy additional services in order to provide the accommodation overnight, right? So they can, they pay, provision, restaurant services, concierge services, provision of linen. So for all the services which hotel buys, they can deduct the VAT. So at the same time, probably the tax burden is being reduced to them. What happens according to this original Commission's proposal is that the private people and the exempt from VAT SMEs who are providing short-term rental services, they will have to, online platforms will have to charge the VAT, but these two guys, they lose the power. They have no right to deduct the input VAT. So, for example, if they buy the fridge for the short-term rental, right, they cannot deduct the VAT. So they are really pushed even in the further disadvantage if you compare with hotels.
Yeah, and the question here is that basically if I put my property, I'm an individual person, I put my listing on Airbnb for 100 euros a night, and let's imagine it's 25%, let's imagine. So Airbnb will add 25 euros, as you said, and the final price is 125 euros. That's what the user sees. In a way, I'm guessing these 25 euros then are paid by the guest and collected by Airbnb that will remit the money to the member state and to locals, to the state where the property is located. So in a way, as an individual, it's invisible to me in a way that it's not, I don't have to do, I guess, to fill in papers. I'm hoping, I don't know about the paperwork, right? But at the same time, it is increasing my prices by 25%. It is in this example, right? So it is tricky. And is it applying to everyone? Like if I'm a company, especially I'm a company, personal property management company, probably I'm already a company large enough to have a VAT number, to be registered. So what's going to happen to me? Maybe I'm already reporting VAT. No, I'm already, I don't know. Maybe I'm already reporting all this in my existing accounting. So is it going to be 25% more? I'm a bit confused here. What's going to happen for these companies?
So when it comes to the companies which are already, registered as VAT payers, I think as such, nothing is changing for them. like literally nothing. What is changing is for those private people who, because they're private, they never ever had to pay VAT, right? Because they're not companies, they're private people. And what is changing? It is changing for the micro enterprises, SMEs, which are exempted from VAT. So this is what is changing. However, how to say, I have a bit of doubt that, like if these two guys, the private people and the exempt from VAT enterprises, are being pulled into this professional net where online platforms will have to collect the VAT on their offer. I feel like we have a risk that short-term rental rules at the local level can become even more unproportionate, even more unjustified, because the governments at this stage, they have let's say, little understanding of the entire short-term rental ecosystem, because they usually believe, that there are few online big short-term rental platforms and that's it. And they have little understanding how many more players are actually there. And if you affect like one little part of that short-term rental ecosystem, eventually everyone else will be affected. So I feel like this could, push absolutely all the players into the professional side, and then governments will say, hey, but everyone is professional, and for this reason they have to comply with all the short-term rental rules which are made for the professionals, because I think we always believe that proportionality principle have to be maintained, because occasional host who is renting the short-term rental, I don't know, 2 weeks a year, cannot comply with the rules which are made, for professional people who are doing it as a business all year round. Because these are the, two different players in the short-term rental ecosystem. So I believe, as I said, there's a risk that short-term rental rules can, go even worse than what we have. So there's a huge risk on that.
And last thing I would say on the VAT thing, so it does mean that, so if nothing is done, basically, so I'm trying to imagine, right? In France, I think for hotels, the VAT is like 10%, I think. Things like this. Would it be like, so would it be like, if it's country by country, would say like, okay, then the country would say France is 10%. Then if for VAT, for short-term rentals, could be also 10% as well. And then it would be a different rate in another country, right? We also have this risk of having different tax rates across countries as well, right?
Okay. So at this stage, indeed, as you said correctly, Thibaut, every member state have different VAT rates. So they have the sort of the regular, the usual VAT, right, for services, and the hotel accommodation has usually a specific VAT rate, and that differs from member state to member state. And indeed, France has 10%. The country such as Denmark, for example, has 25%. So that's quite a major price increase, right? If you think about that. So indeed, and from the platform perspective, again, if I go back to the EU startup platform, the platform will have to understand absolutely all the, VAT rates in different member states, and they will have to apply, different rates for every single offer they have on their platform. So that sounds quite burdensome. Yeah.
Right, that was already the VAT, which is again we can see something that could be happening. And just so we know, so where's that standing? Is it being, so I guess you getting your voice heard to change that. So where are we standing on this? Because when we say January 2025 seems close at the same time. So where are we standing on this?
Yeah, so as I said, so we have this original Commission proposal, which is being discussed now by all 27 EU member states in the Council. This is where all representatives, so EU member states, are sitting. and they are discussing it. And to be honest, it seems that a number of member states have concerns about these, because we as EHHA, we have been voicing very actively our concerns, because we believe it doesn't make sense. It's just it's very unproportional and justified. We have upcoming, regulation on the short-term rental data collection and sharing that is not yet in place. We have a bunch of actually EU rules which are there in force, but we are still waiting, to see the results. And as I said, we as EHHA, we are talking a lot with EU member states, and EU member states seems that they are getting our concerns. So we will see how that develops. It's hard to forecast what will happen next, but we are working hard that we would be able to change something, and we would be able to divert from Commission's original proposal as much as we can for the benefit of the short-term rental players.
So you mentioned this second text, right? That is in that case which is maybe happening, which is a regulation, if I got it right. So what is it about? What's the story of like data sharing with whom, data collection? So again, is it something that just the platform have to do? How does it affect the hosts and the property managers?
So I think, I've been with VHHA now probably for more than 8 years, and I've been always seeing, that when it comes to the local governments they were always calling for more data, because nobody knows how many short-term rentals are there. Nobody knows who is doing what, etc. And the European Commission proposed last year a framework which should actually enable to collect the short-term rental data. How this framework looks like. So Commission is proposing that member states, they should create registration procedures for short-term rental hosts. Registration procedures should be very simple, online. So what the host will have to do is pretty much put the name, pretty much the non-static data, such as, for example, name, address of the short-term rental, telephone number, if he or she complies with underlying short-term rental rules, etc. So it should be very, very sort of basic registration scheme. As soon as he does it, this registration scheme should be able to give automatically and immediately the registration number to the host. And the host, as soon as he has the registration number, he can go on online short-term rental platform, and he has to put this registration number next to the advertisement, in the advertisement itself. What happened next? As soon as online platforms have this registration number, online platforms will be obliged to actually feed the data to national authorities. I think every 3 months at this stage. This is how the text still stands right now. To national authorities all the activity data. What does it mean? It means that they will have to report, for example, how many nights were booked through that online platforms when it comes to the short-term rental advertisements. How many guests were actually planning to stay in that short-term rental. So everything what shows how active, the advertisement was. So they will feed this data to the authorities, and then authorities will be able to combine the non-static data with static data, and hopefully they will be able to enforce the underlying short-term rental rules. As soon, again, this framework is about the data collection and sharing, and the European Commission hopes, and we also hope, that as soon as we will have more data, this more data will lead to better understanding actually what kind of short-term rental market is there at the national level, at the local, at municipalities level. And if we know what kind of market we talk about, we hope that this will lead into the more proportionate, more justified, and non-discriminative short-term rental rules. So at this stage, as I said before, regulation is being discussed in the European Parliament. This is where all politicians coming from all member states and sitting there. There are more than 700 politicians sitting in the European Parliament from every member state. So they're discussing it, and a council, representatives of member states, governments, authorities already made their opinion about this. So we are pretty much waiting what the parliament will say about this rule, and then the three authorities will come together and they will agree on the final text. And we expect that this regulation should be adopted by the end of this year. So I cannot. So I can tell you, only about what the Commission proposed, but how the exact text will look like, we will know pretty much only at the end of this year. And obviously now, as EHJ, we are working again to make sure that the text look as good as it can be for the short-term rental providers.
And here, so in a way, if I remember somewhat, what the EU wanted to do was indeed, to your point, wanted to simplify things for hosts, right? And that sometimes the host, you have to register here, register there, have a license here, like a local one, a regional one, a state one. It's completely crazy, right? So if there's like one registry, common, one way to do it in the EU, that should normally simplify the life of people and maybe let municipalities, regions, states, and nations stop adding way more regulations, right? Because normally that should be a registry that's publicly available, they can tap into without adding way more things. I think that's one of the goals, right?
So at this stage, Thibaut, even though we want the EU register, we thought that it would be very easy to do. At this stage, the way the text is being proposed is saying that member states, they have to create a registry, short-term rental register. So it's better than nothing. It's better, than having different kinds of register at different levels. But still, it provides some sort of clarity, legal clarity, what member states they need to do, in order to collect the data. So, and also what is good about this framework which Commission proposed is that Commission split the burden into two parts, because up until then there was always throwing the ball from one hand to another. Governments were saying we're constantly bombing online platforms like, give us the data, give us data, give us data, whatever you have. But platforms, they cannot give data just like that, because we have the holy grail EU law, which is called GDPR, right? So they are very bound to very strict rules. So they cannot just give simply data just like that because somebody wants it. And so there was always this sort of, this, I would say, dissatisfaction that nobody's giving the data, etc. But there's, again, as I said, there's a rationale behind it why they couldn't do that. And the Commission, in this case, they split the burden. So they say, look, if member states, if you want to get data from online platforms, please do the registration, through which you will collect the static data, these names, addresses, etc. As soon as you have it, then you will be able to get the activity data from the platforms. So they, before it was always, platforms being asked for the same data over and over again. So they're really trying to benefit all the sides, and they are splitting the burden among the parties. And I think this is the beauty of this framework, and I hope it remains that way.
All right, I hope so. And the last question for you, and here, I'm guessing a lot of the cases for the politicians, for example, here, they have really Airbnb in mind, right? And sometimes what on national level, right, when you see some regulations are like, this regulation is really about Airbnb, who you don't like for some reason, but then you don't see, that's the tip of the iceberg. You don't see all the individuals, small companies that you're hitting with this, and that's not the reality of the market. So when discussions you hear maybe something you can share or not, but from politicians, the EU is the same thing. They have like, are they seeing red when they see Airbnb, and they're going to do like, oh, it's about this regulations is about Airbnb, and we're going to do everything to oppose this dangerous American company from doing crazy stuff in the EU? Or how do you convey that it's not just about Airbnb?
Yeah, so this is the purpose of AHHA, because we have a variety of short-term rental players on board, and I always, whenever how to say, the emotions are still the same. Whenever there are emotions at the national level, very similar emotions are here in Brussels too, right? So as you said, it's they're saying, oh, it's Airbnb is guilty for every single problem which exists in the super touristic cities, it's not the case. And then this is where I come into the picture, and I said, look, there's so many players in the short-term rental ecosystem, and I even drafted the sort of the infographic explaining, showing in the simple terms how the short-term rental ecosystem looks like. Thibaut, I'm happy to send it over to you so you could put it on your website.
Sure.
So I'm there to explain them that it's not only about the Airbnb, because whenever you will do to how to say to ban the Airbnb, it will eventually ban the individual local little players at the local level, and it will eventually damage the local economies. So you need to look way beyond that. It's just and I think on at the level of individual players, small entrepreneurs, you have to be voiceful to say, because you have to go and talk to the neighbors, show that what kind of benefits you as a short-term rental provider are bringing to the local communities, because I think this is what we are missing in our short-term rental world. We need to say what good things we bring to local economies, because we always see that only negative news go into the media, right? So we need to be very voiceful, and we need to stand together and just transmit the message that we are not only the guys to be blamed for absolutely all existing problems in the world, which is unfair. So, as I said, with this note, I would really encourage everyone to step up, to be voiceful, to maybe even join the national associations, because these are the guys who are actually fighting all this negativity on your behalf, or on all the short-term rental players' behalf. So join them, help them. As I said, we need more hands, we need more brain, and we can, stand strong together.
That's I think it's a message indeed for everybody to hear in the industry. Viktorija, thank you so much. If people again want to stand together, reach out, what's the best way to reach out to you or to the association?
Well, you can drop an email to info@ehha.com, or just go to EHHA's website, European Holiday Home Association. Just Google it, and you will find us. Or join. You can also join. We are on LinkedIn, and we are also on Twitter. So feel free to join.
Right. Viktorija, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Thibaut.